Andy, have you, first of all, let's just start. Have you been contacted or interviewed by the FBI at all regarding this investigation into James Comey?
Yeah, not at all, Jake. I've not been contacted. I haven't been interviewed. They're not asked to interview me. And of course, if my interactions with Jim Comey 9 years ago in October 2016 was going to be the basis of this entire prosecution, it's unbelievable to think that prosecutors wouldn't at least want to sit down and hear what I had to say about it. Could potentially be a fact witness or just to understand what my perspective is, and that has never happened.
Yeah, I've seen
McCabe himself was quick to point out that if prosecutors wanted a complete picture, his perspective could have been crucial. After all, his interactions with Comey go back years, and specifically in October 2016, they worked side by side. Couldn't his testimony either strengthen the case or expose flaws in it? Yet, silence to him, and to many observers, that silence speaks volumes. It suggests not a pursuit of truth, but perhaps a selective hunt for narratives that fit a predetermined outcome. And if that's the case, then we need to ask ourselves, are prosecutors truly seeking justice, or are they carefully curating which voices are allowed into the story? Now, imagine the weight of being in McCabe's position. For decades, he dedicated his life to federal service, rising through the ranks of the FBI. And now, when history is being written about events he directly lived through, he's treated as though his account doesn't matter.
I've seen others out there speculating that you're the person 3 named in the indictment as someone Comey allegedly authorized to leak information on his behalf. But a source familiar with the indictment told me that person 3 in the indictment is actually Comey's longtime friend, Columbia Law School professor Dan Richmond, who was also a special government employee at the FBI at the time. Is that your understanding as well, or do you not know?
Yeah, well, I mean, none of us know with great specificity because, as you said, the indictment really has no facts in it whatsoever. But as far as I'm concerned, I absolutely do not believe it's referring to me in any way. There's a couple of reasons for that. First, I never asked Jim Comey to authorize any disclosure to the media because I didn't have to. At that time in the FBI, there's only 2 people who had the authority to make that decision independently. One was Jim Comey and the other was me. It was something I did as a part of my job pretty routinely. So around that exchange in October, just that request never happened, which would make his answer to Chuck Grassley's question in 2017, if that's what they've clearly indicted him about, doesn't really have anything to do with me. As far
These weren't small leaks either. We're talking about major stories that appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. Stories containing information about ongoing FBI investigations. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If Richmond was the source, and if Comey had indeed authorized those disclosures, it would mean that one of the highest law enforcement officials in the nation had quietly greenlit leaks that influenced the public narrative in the middle of historic investigations into both Donald Trump and Clinton. Now, doesn't that sound like something the public deserves clarity on? Richmond, when questioned, denied that Comey ever authorized him to leak. The FBI didn't stop there. They launched investigations, reviewed computer records, analyzed phone logs, and pulled apart the communications of everyone who had access to the information.
Mr. Richmond was interviewed and investigated as a part of those leak cases. I would expect that Jim Comey, and probably I, was also included in the initial list of potential suspects, as is very routine in leak cases. Every person who has access or had access to the information that is thought to have been leaked is included in that group of suspects initially. But those cases were all closed in 2020. So after 3 years of investigating, after interviewing Mr. Richmond, after no doubt looking at computer and telephone records from everyone who had access to that information, these cases were closed without any requests for indictments.
Yeah.
So the idea that they would use those cases now, all these years later, is bizarre.
Well, the source familiar with the indictment told me that it actually is in reference to what was called the Arctic Haze leak investigation, which deals with those 4 stories that you're referring to in the New York Times, Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. Richmond was interviewed. Richmond denied that Comey authorized him to leak. But let me ask you just more broadly. The indictment says that Comey lied in 2017 and then again in 2020 when he was asked about the 2017 testimony, when he denied having ever, quote, authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation, unquote. Given your experience with Comey, was he honest when he said he had never authorized a leak?
McCabe frames it clearly. This isn't about uncovering the truth of leaks or holding officials accountable for their words. It's about political score settling. A system that should operate above personal grudges is now at risk of becoming a weapon for them. And if prosecutors are moving under the shadow of political pressure rather than independent judgment, what happens to the rule of law itself? Doesn't it become fragile, vulnerable, even meaningless? Now let's bring this closer to the personal. When McCabe is asked if he fears becoming a target, his answer is strikingly human. Of course he does. Who wouldn't? He's already lived through years of investigations, audits, and inquiries. From special counsels to congressional committees, he has faced accusations that ultimately collapsed. He describes it as exhausting, relentless, but not something that shakes his belief in the integrity of the work he and his colleagues did.
All I can say to that, Jake, is I'm not aware of Jim Comey ever authorizing some other person to leak information. That's not something I experienced personally. It's not something I saw in all the time I spent working around Jim Comey. So I can't sit here and characterize his testimony, which I think is far from clear enough to be the basis of a false statement or perjury prosecution. But nevertheless, all I can say is what my own experience revealed, and that is I didn't ever see Jim Comey authorizing other people to leak information.
You're an attorney. You spent more than 20 years at the FBI. What do you make of this indictment overall, especially in the context of President Trump exerting public pressure on the Attorney General, on the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia, in the sense that Eric Siebert got fired and replaced by Lindsey Halligan? What do you make of this all? And also his promise that he's going to go after, or he hopes that there will be other political opponents who face prosecution.
I mean, there's only one thing to make of it, Jake. It is absolutely what the president himself characterized it as. It's vengeance. This is the revenge tour. It's the tour he promised when he ran for office in 2024. It's what most of us who have fallen in his crosshairs before expected, and it's what we're seeing now. And I absolutely expect we'll see more people fall into the same sort of vindictive prosecutorial defense posture. And let me just say, Jake, I'll take you back to 2017, the beginning of the Trump administration, when President Trump started having his first interactions with Jim Comey, which really troubled us to the extent that Jim wrote those now infamous memos about it. And those first few interactions, we would talk about them after the fact. And we were almost naive in thinking, is this president actually trying to influence our investigative decision making? We didn't want to believe it. So we started almost contorting ourselves to make up other excuses for what we saw was happening. Well, we thought, well, he's never worked around prosecutors or the department before. He's not familiar with the norms of how we do this independently. That was until he came out and absolutely explicitly asked us to drop the case against Mike Flynn. It was one of these like watershed moments. Well, now fast forward to where we are today. Those requests aren't happening quietly between the president and the director of the FBI in the Oval Office. They're happening on social media. We can all see exactly what he's saying, what he intends to do. His intention is vengeance.